Now, y'all have been waiting a whole week for this. So I hope not to disappoint, but I hope you all know you always get the message that Spirit delivers through me. I got some notes, I have some ideas, and I've got little old black me. But I am not the only one responsible for this message. So Spirit, don't fail me now. Well, I want to talk to you about what it means to have a Blacker history of the United States. And it's important because we sometimes get the facts wrong, sometimes on purpose, sometimes sheerly by accident, sometimes because the truth is simply too unbearable. But I want to remind you that a Blacker history of the United States requires a focus on Blackness throughout the year, equal in emphasis to what we see right now in February. Can I get an amen? Amen. This emphasis would link the stories of anti-Blackness, how we have suffered and how people have wronged me and my people, along with developments in Black liberatory thought. It's not enough just to stay in the pain that happened. We also have to deal with the fact that Black people did, in fact, figure out a way out of no way, together with our own understanding of the divine. If we did this, we'd have a unified and seamless narrative of a country whose central conflict over centuries continues to be the skin color of free laborers, our personhood, and how much justice applies to each of us. I read again. If we had a narrative that connected stories of Black liberatory thought as well as structural anti-Blackness, we would have a better understanding of our centuries-long conflict of people here in the United States, whether occupied or somehow otherwise won, about the skin color of free laborers, our personhood, and how much justice applies to people who look like me. Black History Month isn't without its issues. I've certainly just mentioned that, namely that it puts all of the history of Black Americans into the shortest month of the year. That was not the original point. It was originally Black History Week and it extended. It just happened to be February. It's less malicious than it seems, but it is a glaring omission that we haven't updated it. All right? Let's just stick with that. One of the other issues is if we only look at the history, when we look backward, we ignore some of the other struggles we've gone through up till now and are going through at this very moment. And most importantly, Black history is mostly taught in the home for Black Americans, just like queer Americans. The ways that we learn our histories are often taught in spaces that don't center us. So something that happens out here might make sure that we can get through an epic of history in enough time. We have a week to get through this epic of American history, but every night after school, I had more Black history in the home, and the Black history I knew didn't only reach back to George Washington Carver and other famous names, it reached back to auntie and uncle who were key to this movement or that movement, or were right behind the scenes, made that sandwich, made sure the lines were prepared, maybe even ran the hospitality table. The Black history that Black people know is often much richer and more nuanced, which helps us understand that Black History Month is in fact not for Black peoples. It presents a whitewashed version of reconstructed stories. Sometimes we forget that, the FBI did push Bayard Rustin out of the movement that Reverend Dr. King was building. I wonder how different the movement for Black lives would look right now if the queer-centeredness of Bayard Rustin's life had continued to be the central organizing principle of those movements. You can clap it out. We know that Black history has been gay and queer all the time, but we often leave that out. Reverend Dr. King was not there to be one central figure. He understood his place in a movement that was co-constructed by matriarchs, patriarchs, and people of no gender, beyond all gender, or multiple genders, in making what was impossible happen so that we could all get free. That turns Black History Month, in fact, into something of a their story month, all right? It's not our story, but someone else's that has been imposed upon us. And it removes Black people ourselves from being central to Black history. I remember I had a mentor, she's still around, but she was a little bit more influential for me a few years ago, who had to sit me down and remind me, hey, Greg, you know you're one of those Black lives who matter, right? Oh, snap! And there I was, right at the center of Black history and Black future, because we are still making the history, we are still making the stories that our descendants will look back on. And so that helps us understand Black Futures Month. Some groups like to celebrate Black Futures, which helps us look back both at the past, but helps us imagine new ways forward. This is brought to us most centrally, but not exclusively, by the author N.K. Jemisin, who wrote a collection of stories, or rather edited an anthology of stories a few years ago called How Long Till Black Futures Month. The stories in this anthology are fascinating, and I highly encourage you to read it some other time. They range in length. You do not have to read it cover to cover. It's an anthology. Pick the stories that sing to your heart, knowing that sometimes when we choose stories that don't sing to our heart, we can learn deeper and more challenging lessons. The stories are of compassion and outsider knowledge against a construct of society that's always trying to put largely Black peoples, but not exclusively, outside of the center. Black Futures Month is observed by the Movement for Black Lives. It's observed by the organization that has become Black Lives Matter, which is a little bit different than the phrase itself. And also by the University of California school system. They also acknowledge Black Futures Month. In Black Futures Month, we understand a history and a future where all Black peoples are free. We've talked about this so many times before. Blackness exists in many different constructs. It's not only about skin color. Sometimes who is Black is contextually dependent. In this Black History Month, we're focusing on the racialization, on the Black-skinnedness of Black history, because we don't always stay there. Black Futures Month also helps us understand that Black love is revolutionary. And here are some of the ways that the Movement for Black Lives helps us understand what Black revolutionary love can look like. We can divest from the structures that pain us in order to invest in the communal structures that help us get free together. We can invest in platonic love. All right, Bell Hooks talks about this, that sometimes this narrative that romantic and sexual love are the pinnacle of all love does more damage to all of us than good, because it makes us forget that the love which we share and which abides in each and every one of us is important, central, and the love that we have for friends and others in community is sometimes what gets us to the next side, what helps us get through whatever trial or tribulation we are experiencing. The love of this community not only helps us abide, it helps us reside, and it helps us move on. Black love is queer love, and we're not talking just about queer gender identity or queer sexual orientation or queer romantic orientation. We're talking about queerness as a vast space, a vast creative space that is subversive to the structures of love, that is subversive to the structures of injustice that we have now. It rejects status quo. It rejects zero-sum thinking. Just because someone else has more resources does not mean there aren't enough resources for all of us. As a matter of fact, when we share resources, we have more than we put together in the first place. You know this, right? Black revolutionary love is about mutual aid. Mutual aid is not about charity. Mutual aid is about building community itself. That compassion, justice, and joy we talk about each and every Sunday is the center of mutual aid. Black revolutionary love understands the significance of faith and spirituality, as well as that of bodily autonomy. Knowing that we're freely choosing to do things together, an ethic of consent is so much more empowering than doing things merely out of a sense of obligation. If you do things out of a sense of obligation to build a better world, I want you to also dig a little deeper so that you can find the ways that you are making decisions that help us all get free. And Black revolutionary love illustrates love and respect for the natural world. We illustrate this through climate preparation. The climate is changing. We can change it back given enough time, but we also need to be prepared in the short term for things that are going to get worse before they get better. That's love. That we are doing this in Black communities. That's love. That we are connected to a climate mandate that puts power in the hands of all of the people. Power in the hands of all of the people is our deepest experience of love. And so I'll do this kind of quickly. A Black art history of the United States is contextual, because without a complete and accurate understanding of the histories of all peoples, we have a skewed history of the United States, a skewed history of Hawaii. I loosely paraphrase Dr. Adam Robinson. Black history on the continent looks a little bit different than it does here on these islands. We know for a fact that Black people started coming here as early as 1810. Yes, while there was still enslavement of my peoples back on the continent, folks were coming here often as sailors to the Kingdom of Hawaii, where slavery was illegal. Most notably, or at least firstly, was Anthony Allen, who was born into enslavement and escaped at the age of 24, getting work on a merchant marine ship. He worked with a captain for 8 years before finally befriending him and convincing him to take him to Hawaii so that he could be free. He is notable because he founded the first resort in Waikiki that had a hotel, a restaurant, a bowling alley, and a maritime hospital.
Wow.
He married a native Hawaiian woman, and together they had many children. The Constitution of Hawaii, especially during the Kingdom period, always pronounced that slavery shall, under no circumstances whatever, be tolerated in the Hawaiian Islands. Whenever a slave shall enter Hawaiian territory, he shall be free. The Constitution notably did not define what slavery was. It was up to the elite. I like that. I like that. If you see slavery and you recognize slavery, you are free now.
So let me put it away, okay?
Of course, there's Betsy Stockton, who came here in 1823 and founded the first public school on Maui in Lahaina. She worked with missionaries after being trained at Princeton Theological Seminary and learned Hawaiian very, very quickly. There are Oliver and George Washington Hyatt, who were advisors and band leaders to the various Kamehamehas. And we also have to understand part of the freedom ethic of this place has a lot to do with the indelible racism on the continent, and especially during the territorial period. One thing that drives the racial construct, racial makeup of these islands is the importance and the finality. I'm gonna wait. Those motorcycles always know right when I hit fever pitch. It's all right. Spirit will sustain me through this as well. But we know the work of the Chinese Exclusion Act, the work of barring large populations of Asian immigrants to these islands and to the rest of the United States impacted who came here. And so after that time, we start to see more and more immigrants from the Caribbean, especially Cape Verde. We see more African immigrants, Puerto Rican immigrants. This is all related to the Spanish-American War, or the war where the United States decided to take all of Spain's territories. This is important because sometimes when we look at the racial makeup of these islands now, depending on which statistic you get, they're about 1.6 to 1.9 people who are African American. 1.6 to 1.9% of the population of Hawaii is Black. But if we understand the Popolo definition a little bit more expansively, people of African descent make up a much larger proportion of the population. Up to 4% of Hawaiian population is of African descent. This includes folks from the Caribbean islands, directly from the continent, Puerto Ricans who are also mixed race and have African ancestry. This changes our understanding of about 1 in every 70 or so people being Black here on island to 1 in every 25 Hawaiians is of African descent. 1 in every 25. Each and every day, you walk by somebody, you move by somebody, you interact with somebody who is of African descent. Black Americans and people of African descent, Popolo most generically, are part and parcel of the history of Hawaii itself. We just can't pretend that the work of the Kingdom period absolves us from the anti-Blackness that we experience on the islands here today. That's been part of the fabric of this place since the territorial period and certainly since statehood. We see this most directly in the disproportionate incarceration rates of Black Americans here on island. We see this in the lack of representation in leadership. If 1 in every 25 people here on these islands is of African descent, why is that not what city council looks like? Why is that not what the newscasters look like? How is it possible when people of all races commit crimes at exactly the same rates or close enough to it, that Black Americans are still represented more than any other racial group in our prisons? It doesn't make sense that 4% of the population could commit the majority of the crimes. We need to know our history. We need to know our future. And so when we imagine our future, imagine for just a moment with me, imagine a future where we celebrate the centrality of Blackness to Hawaiian identity. Imagine a rich and vibrant understanding of Hawaiianness that is intertwined with Blackness itself. Imagine this future where Aloha Mahopopolo is a key expression of queer Black love, because Black love is Hawaiian love, because Hawaiian love is queer love, because together we understand that putting power in the hands of all the people, that putting power in the roots of all the people is the deepest love we can experience. And imagine with me that we lead from a context where the upbringings of every person on these islands are about liberation, a liberation so bold, so deep, so queer, so revolutionary that it can only be identified as Black. When we make all of these imaginings come true, we will have truly lived into a Blacker history here on island, as well as all around the United States. When we live into these imaginings, we will have lived into a Black future that knows no stop, that makes sure that all Black peoples are free, and by extension, all peoples are free from that day forward and for all eternity. And when we make these imaginings come true, I pray in that Blacker future, in that Blacker future history, that we will have truly earned the respect of our descendants. All of this we hold as we move forward to a Blacker history, and together we say, Amen, Ashe, and blessed be.